Guys, it's great to have you both on. So we're going to kick off. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me. Chandana's not going to make it, so it'll be just us three middle-aged guys moaning.
Am I there now? That's
Yeah,
me.
yeah, you're enrolled.
I am there.
Right.
Yeah,
I just sailed by it.
I'm still technically a millennial though. I was born in '81. So.
Are you? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Oh man.
You don't look so shocked.
You're going to be one of these annoying people who's successful at a young age, you know.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah. Okay, look.
Let's let history decide that one. I think
we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to not 1981, but maybe 1980, maybe 1995, Ken. And you can give us a little bit of a flavor for the early years before you studied computer science.
So how far do you want me to go back?
Oh, tell us about like growing up in, it was Dublin, right?
Yeah. Born and raised in Dublin. I was about to jump into a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air skit there. Yeah, born and raised in Dublin, and went to national school, primary school in Castleknock, and then secondary school in a school called St. Connor's College in Ballsbridge. After that, went to IT Tala, where I studied computing and IT, and worked on the techie side of the world. Enjoyed that hugely, but always loved the business side. From kind of grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Dad was, successful in his own right, in every right, I suppose. To be fair to him, he left school when he was young to set up the business that he ran. Had 120 people employed in Dublin, and so always kind of grew up in that environment. So it was that kind of strange itch of both. First computer coming into the house at 14 years of age, Packard Bell P60. So remember it well. Upgrading, going to CompuStore and seeing Siemens Green, upgrading the RAM from 8 megs to 16. Wow, I do feel old now. Okay. Yeah, so kind of always had that kind of twin track, the tech side and the business side, and enjoyed both sides of them. Okay. Worked, had a number of entrepreneurial endeavors and forays, and everything from setting up a web design company with a couple of college friends through to, some wacky ideas, some even more wacky ideas. And worked then in the likes of Gateway, HP, Dell. Got some travel in, worked for an Irish company called CR2. We would do banking and ATM software, great company. Really nice people there, love the team there. And began in IT, and then kind of slowly kind of moved over into more of the business side. But I left there and set up the one of my kind of biggest pushes into the entrepreneurial world, which was a recruitment and candidate management software called Candidates Direct.
Were you the founder of that?
Yeah. And I think that the biggest lesson was I was the founder and developer of it, and realized I wasn't actually that good a coder. But it's much better to sit behind a computer and code than it is to go out and get a rejection from trying to sell and close a deal. Right. So I perfected this product, this solution, and it was really good. It was genuinely really good. And we had McDonald's Restaurants Ireland, Friends First, DAA, Brown Thomas's, and a whole host of others come on, Anglo-Irish Bank, come on board to use the platform. And I wrote a little script to work out how many lines of code had been written. And I think it was 5.5 copies of War and Peace were written over a 18-month period of time. So I have a very, very understanding wife who I met when I was 16, in fifth year in school. So she's kind of, the entrepreneur's wife, or the entrepreneur's husband, I suppose, the entrepreneur's spouse. And the challenges that they have to go and the support that they have to provide for the entrepreneur is huge. And unfortunately, November 2008 came and hit and wiped us out. That was the end of recruitment as we could see it. Yeah. At this stage, I was joined by a good friend of mine, Stephen Noonan, and I remember it was October, November time. We drove out to Dollymount Strand. We were part of the DIT Hothouse program, and we drove out to Dollymount Strand, and we sat in the pier at Dollymount Strand.
Can I stop you for a second?
Of course you can.
But tell us about the jump from the kind of relatively safe world to doing your own thing. Like, what was the spark that ignited that change?
I think it was the joy that it brought.
So from watching your dad, or did you just get fed up working in a big company, or what was the?
I don't think it was ever a case of getting fed up and working in a big company. I think it was always the want to be. Always the one to be part of. I was always the class clown. I was always the entertainer at the party. I was always that person. So I always wanted to be or continue that in my career. So I remember sitting this fateful day on Dollymount Strand with Stephen, and we opened up a recruitment website, and we listed all the industries, starting with aviation and working our way down. And we just was like, no, that's in serious trouble. That's in serious trouble. And we basically just said, we're done.
Oh, wow.
I made a call on it, which was absolutely gut wrenching. Worked in an off license then for the next couple of months in brother-in-law's off license on Meath Street, and then was invited to work with a telco company called Blueface, to help them do a strategy review, and just sort of help them maybe see the wood for the trees. Nothing more than that. And they liked what was there, perhaps, and asked me to stay on as commercial and technical director for them, which I did for about 3 years. And then I moved on to the NDRC, the National Digital Research Centre, where I was an entrepreneur in residence, helping to commercialize a lot of what great projects they had. One of them was SilverCloud.
This EIR thing is a term you hear, and it means different things to different people. So what did it mean in practice for you?
I think in practice it kind of meant help, because they had assembled these amazing groups of people that were academics or clinicians, but would have probably quite a limited exposure to commercial rigor, commercial reality, sort of sales, and needed help on that, needed help on how to commercialize what they had, what they were working on. So that's what it meant to me. And I met with the team. I'm going to get the timing right. I'm going to say 2010, about October, November 2010, and met with the team and was just blown away by them, what they were doing, the process that they have, the effort that they made, the time they put into it, the passion that they had. And fast forward, make a long story short, 12 plus months later, I decided to go native, as they say. So we decided to spin out the IP. We were selling the IP to a UK company at the time, UK publicly limited company, and it was clear the UK public company was taking the proverbial, and wanted just to see this IP go back up on a shelf into an academic or into a university and not be seen again. So at the end of a very frustrating meeting, slammed down the book, left, spoke to the guys, said, why don't we do this ourselves? And kind of the thoughts that went around people's heads were, listen, this is, if they don't like it, and they're a big company and they don't like it, I don't think there's something here. And I said, listen, big companies make big mistakes. So we did. We took that company head on, and broke into the UK market, as being kind of our first big push. Okay. With SilverCloud. So we spun out in, I think it was about March 2012. But listen, that's all nostalgia. That's history without the pain, as they say. It's very easy to gloss over so many of the sleepless nights in between, and as Jim would say, and attest to as well.
Well, that's perfect. So then let's bridge over. Meanwhile, in Boston, if we go back to the mid-90s, Jim, you were starting out in financial services, having watched your dad sort of be successful.
Oh, wow.
Is that correct?
That's going way back.
You remember back those days?
Yeah, I still have it.
Tell us a little bit about your early, career before you got to starting companies and investing in companies, and kind of what the motivating force was.
I was dying to become a stockbroker. It was kind of a cool job. My favorite movie was Wall Street. And my father was a kind of a well-known stockbroker in the Boston area. He had the same name as me, and used to walk around doing my wife calls it doing the Jim Joyce, meeting people. I was dying I wanted to go into financial services because my dad did it.
Yeah.
Fascinated by investment markets and stock markets and that whole system, and I just thought it was a wild world. And plus, unlike your time, Ken, there were no, well, probably maybe similar, there was no jobs. That was like a really, that was a good job. So I had to learn how to and I'd kind of been involved in sales, like, you know, I did an economics degree at Fordham, and you know, kind of business and sales, and that was kind of how I was trying to learn about that, and it joined it, and I just had an absolute blast, you know, working with a bunch of people my age, trying to understand investments and the markets, and just totally pumped about it. I'd actually, you know, starting companies, I didn't really know there was such a thing as starting a companies at that stage. I don't know if I wasn't that worldly. I'm sure.
Just investing in them.
Yeah, investing them, and fascinated by, you know, I'm kind of a, as you know, I'm kind of a quick thinker. You know, I kind of like to analyze things and kind of jump into it. I've just found that fascinating. Yeah.
So you did that for a little while in a couple of firms, and then you ended up, well, you moved to SilverCloud. That was quite a big transition, right?
Right. Well, you know, no, I realized very quickly after being a stockbroker for 2 years that I never wanted to do it again. You know, so it seemed to me, you know, and no offense to the good people that do it, but it was like, you know, every day seemed like Groundhog's Day, and it was chasing the sale and chasing those things. So I decided to go do an MBA, which was quite fashionable at the time before they became unfashionable. And I came up with the idea. I had some family in Ireland. I came up with the idea of doing an MBA in Ireland at University College of Dublin. Yeah. So I actually hopped on a plane with a friend of mine. We went to Ireland. We fell in love with the place, did an MBA. And coming out of the MBA, I said to myself, it seemed to me the MBA spent a lot of time talking about things, you know, and strategizing. And I'm like, you know, you're going to go want to work for an industry where they can afford to pay for people just to sit around talking about things. And so the two areas was either financial services or the pharmaceutical, or was it the pharmaceutical industry or the technology industry seemed to be the place that was the most. So I convinced, so I remember Sharing Plow Pharmaceuticals was recruiting in Dublin, and they were looking to hire Irish people, and they accidentally hired an American.
Is that true?
Because I was a good talker.
Yeah.
The Irish people were sitting in the corner being too shy. I walked across the room, introduced myself, and then got hired back into Sharing Plow's headquarters back in New Jersey. Yeah. So that was my move into the farm industry in my 20s, you know.
Yeah. And then you did the best part of 10 years of that, and you ended up kind of running the Irish business, and then you got itchy feet, and then
unlike Ken's story, I was kind of, you know, I want to start running things right away. As soon as I learned anything, I wanted to run it, you know. So I was moving my way through the Sharing Plow ranks, and it's funny, I landed in Ireland, and I set up the division for Sharing Plow. So that was the first kind of commercial division that they set up. So I built a business. It was kind of like I was building my own business, but I had the backing of a big pharmaceutical company. Yeah. And I was, again, fascinated by Ireland. I was fascinated by what was happening in Ireland, that you could talk to ministers, and you could meet this kind of high level, kind of people.
Get access to people.
Yeah. And then people were kind of, you know, I was also fascinated by in the Irish market, like when we would do pharmaceutical sales in the US, you would fight to see 4 people in a day. In the UK, you would fight to see 2 people in a day. And in Ireland, you'd see 13 people a day. And every single person would tell you they would buy, you know, they would prescribe your product first. Oh. And at the end of the day, the Irish person would tell you that actually none of them were going to prescribe your product at the end of the conversation. So I was fascinated by the pharma market, and I decided, you know, I was gifted with a very challenging boss that I didn't see the full potential in Jim Joyce, you know, the way I saw it. And I saw an opportunity to set up my first company, which was Point of Care.
Yeah, Point of Care. Yeah. So you left the relative safety of Sharing Plow, and you went out on your own, right? It was literally you and.
Yep. I went out on my own, and I tried to, you know, parlay a little bit of the reputation I had and some contacts I made into raising some capital. And I built I had a business plan. Yeah. And I walked in, and I got people to fund the business plan of the idea of kind of almost like changing the Irish healthcare system. So it was like trying to migrate care for patients that start in the hospitals and need to be maintained in the community on like IV administration systems. So I had come up with this concept and pitched into him, and it was incredibly ambitious, completely naive.
Yeah.
And I raised capital and I just started pursuing it. So I think is that when we met, Martin? Is that?
Yeah, that was around the time we met. Yeah, around as you were probably 4 or 5 years into it at that stage. And
Right.
so then
Right.
I wanted to basically in this session, I wanted to kind of get your combined views of selling into the Irish health system, selling into the UK health system, and then selling into the US, because you have experience, both of you have experience of those different systems. So I thought it'd be interesting to get the different perspectives of what was Jim's story selling into HSC and what was Ken's, and then we could do the same for the NHS and the same in the US. So tell us about, the 13 people you met who all said they'd buy the product. Tell us about the, when you then actually asked them to sign the check and put their hand in their pocket, which new innovative point of care solution. How did that play out?
Yeah. So I think I find that the Irish market is the lack of kind of like rigidity to the market, early stage can be quite attractive. Like, so meaning that there's not a lot of, you're not competing with a lot of systems, a lot of existing systems and existing structures and classic systems. So there's undoubtedly some angle to get your product introduced into the marketplace. And then people are quite willing to talk to you, so the conversations kind of get going. So you're talking to people. So the kind of that gating, in the Irish marketplace is a little less, but then the lack of the system to kind of scale your product or to go, beyond that, it becomes a disadvantage really, really quickly. So you can kind of get some initial traction, some initial feedback in the Irish market, but then there's no way, if you have a really compelling product, then there's not a natural bridge to kind of scaling it to the next, to the next system. And the market becomes quite competitive really quickly, in the Irish marketplace. So any of the big institutions are quite tricky to work with, but there's lots of different little angles. So experimentation, good, scaling, very, kind of binary. I don't know.
You're smiling there. Is that a similar story from SilverCloud?
Yeah, I mean, not mention the HSE or anyone in particular. I think there's always been a challenge in selling into Ireland, and listen, I'm as guilty of it as any other Irish person. We're one of the hardest markets to sell into, and I tell people that repeatedly. Go and sell into. Somebody said it before to me, and I can't remember who it was, but they were spot on. Go sell to Manchester first. Not for any other negative reason other than it's just the way we're wired. We're just wired slightly differently, which is essentially to look at everything with a mass degree of skepticism, a mass degree of, sure, my cousin could build that. Or my nephew could do that, and he could do it for a tenth the price. And your negotiation just is starting on that keel,
right?
And probably from an Irish perspective, it may have changed. So I moved over to Boston 3 years ago. It might have changed since, but there's an unwillingness for us to pay for software, or a perception of it versus, to use a term that you use, Jim, the rigidity that is there in the UK, and oh my God, it's there in the US in different ways. And listen, all three markets have their challenges, of course they do. And it's a very different set of skills. It's the old adage, what got us there won't get us, what got us here won't get us to there. You kind of need to really apply that to each country as you go in and you go after. So yeah, we really didn't interact with kind of Irish healthcare systems, let's call them that, until we had a huge share of the UK market, if I'm being kind of honest. And it was really, really, really disheartening for us. We tried everything.
Is it true that they're more likely to listen to Jim because he's got an American accent than you or me? Do you think that's a factor? And
I don't even know if it comes down to that. I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is.
So you basically cracked the UK market or got a chunk of it before you then came back, and after that,
and it was. I always remember one adage, which was there was a roaming group that went around the world. It was a mental health leadership group, and a very senior person within one of the big Irish health systems reached out and said, "I'm very embarrassed to learn about you through," and was asked about you through some American Midwest health system. and Jesus, your stuff looks great. Yeah, I don't know whether that's coming as a back of the skepticism or what it is, but it was certainly a big challenge for us.
And you were successfully cracked the Irish market. Like you go on, tell us that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's 100%. It's hard, right? You know, it's almost like, I could see if I knew more about the Irish market, I would have done Ken's strategy. You know, I would have gone to the if I knew more about it. Yeah. But I think that this lack of framework, right? This lack of like, so like, you know, I cracked it through the pharmaceutical companies, and then, you know, my first company, very painfully, I had a theory to crack it through the health insurance companies. And I kind of saw like my classic, you know, my MacGuffin theory, which was like, you know, if I could get the smallest insurance company to reimburse it, you know, and kind of move up the chain. But then I realized that actually, the largest insurance company would be quite reluctant to, you know, embrace kind of the innovation we're bringing in. And in my second company, it was the pharmaceutical companies. So it was the fact that the pharmaceutical companies had scale and access to patients. And so if they didn't have that, I wouldn't have approached them that way. So it was like, I was almost exclusively looking at it saying they had distribution, they were willing to pay for it. And they had probably more of an international mindset, you know, about kind of, you know, structuring programs and bringing them through and how that's going on. So that's how we cracked the pharma market. The Irish market. Yeah. Was on the back of the multinationals. Yeah. You know, that had some kind of procurement process and some kind of, you know, more sophisticated buying patterns. But I agree with Ken though, the lack of willingness to kind of pay up for the services can be a real problem sometimes. And then a lot of times what happens is then you'll have you won't have a competitive market and ultimately they have to pay up for it. But in that kind of market formation, definitely. I mean, now I'm finding it for experimentation excellent. You know, we're starting to get, you know, cloud in the market, but yeah. I think Ken had
how do you compare that to the UK then, which is obviously much bigger, much more structure? Ken, you've had some success there, and Jim, you have as well. Like, tell us like how you compare kind of the Irish market and the NHS, and how that kind of changed your strategy in terms of market entry or market scaling.
Yeah, I mean, I'll like Ken will talk about it more because he's had more success there than I've had, because we're just kind of entering into it. We've had a few goes at the UK market, and you know, for the product that we're selling, where we're trying to get access to a certain type of patient that's already has a level of support, that we found that there was more support in the UK that we had to compete. Like in the Irish market, there wasn't the support. We didn't have to compete against a lot of support that was there. Whereas in the UK market, there was a decent amount of support. And the NHS had, you know, fairly sophisticated structure. So I think that I like selling into the UK market. You know, I think that there's a level of clarity to it, and there's a level of communication. But it's like anything. You have to be willing to not get your first sale for a period of time. So you have to kind of stay the distance on the market and kind of go at it for a long period of time. Whereas I think you get some joy in the Irish market a little bit earlier. Yeah. So I feel like now we just got appointed by the NHS England as a, you know, HealthBeacon did as a, you know, through their procurement process, which is kind of like the first step. Yeah. You know, and then now we have to kind of sell into the market. But that'd be my take. Ken, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a lovely phrase, and it's one I think we should pass down. The fact that I'm now being classified as middle-aged, passed down to the younger generations. It's that persistence, it's that staying in the boxing ring, and it's just, you know, and you know, it's going to take multiple goes, and you just got to stay in and just keep getting hit, and stay in it for as long as you possibly can do. Yeah, for me, like if I cast my mind back to 2010, 2011, in Ireland, it was a blessed relief to fly to London, because that was the time I stopped listening to Irish radio, because I couldn't take it anymore. It was news talk. It was just horrific to listen to the news all the time. And it was this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of negativity. Yeah. And listen, I'm not looking for dishonest news of positivity, but I am looking for some level of balance here. So if you picture it, you know, you fly in, you leave Dublin, and there was loads of people who this was Terminal 2 was just built, or was built a couple of years at this stage. So it was brand new, still spanky new. Aer Lingus kind of had dominance in it. You're in and out of the lounge, and it was all the same faces you saw all the time. And I basically lived that life for quite some time, just flying back and forth to London, Manchester, wherever it might be. But you would come out of the airport, you'd hop into the tube or into a train or whatever it is, and you'd walk out, and you walked out into, oh wow, they're actually still buying and selling things here. Business is still going on, versus in Ireland it was the opposite. It was just lockdown, misery, horrific. Yeah. So it was a strange tonic almost. It was a welcome tonic that there was a willingness to continue commerce. So that was kind of the backdrop of the first number of years flying back and forth to the UK. Quickly made my way through the Aer Lingus loyalty program on short hops, which is unusual apparently, I was told. And yeah, we entered the market. There was an existing competitor there who was the one who was buying the IP back at the earlier story. We just basically went into a dogfight with them. You know, they hadn't invested in their product. They hadn't invested in their offering. They were overselling, under-delivering. Lots of cliches, I realize, and all the stuff I just said. But there is something there, which is the under-investing in the product. There is something there about allowing your sales team, or even you encouraging your sales team to sell. Oh, I know this organization only needs 1,000 licenses. I'll sell them 5,000. Yeah. And you know what? Who cares what happens? You know, you have a great year the first year. Second year will be what the hell, and third year is going to be dismal. That's kind of what happened to them after a couple of years. And we kind of changed the pricing model. We changed the pricing structure. We changed all these various elements and moved to a much more pricing model, which is much more about engaged users rather than population coverage. Because they would sell population coverage and they would walk away with a huge big check. But we were wedded to the success by selling based on the number of activations, essentially. So if the organization didn't activate it, we didn't really get paid. So both us and the organization were wedded for success, I suppose, was a key thing. So that kind of win-win-win mentality is same as what we took here to the US.
And did you have to go kind of hospital by hospital or trust by trust?
Yeah.
Or was it that, like, you know, that once it took a long time for the first domino to fall, but once it fell, it kind of went around? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, we did, and Ashlyn, who was kind of our first sales member, myself and herself were flying back and forth all the time. She had a contact in Durham and Darlington NHS service, who was one of the first NHSs who took a chance on us, one of the very early ones. And the NHS has been really, really good to us.
In what regard?
I think in willingness to embrace what we were doing and why, willingness to give us a chance. There's been a few amazing organizations along our journey, some very big ones. One of the biggest insurers in the world, one of the people in there took a serious gamble on us in July 2012. We were only 6 months old, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. And with a huge contract at that time for us, that was probably 80% of our revenue that year, maybe even more. They took a chance on us, and we made it work because of the chance they took on us as well. But so it's character building, I suppose. But yeah, so back and forth, we met with then another NHS service, Berkshire NHS, just west side of London, where we met a really like-minded person, Judith Chapman, who's their clinical director. And we could see what her vision was for delivery of mental health care. And we agreed to partner. And one of those partnerships that was win-win-win, it meant that we were able to bring our product up to NHS spec and IAPT, increasing access to psychological therapy spec, and work together on bringing SilverCloud across the UK, across England. And it was very much bring on one, you get one more neighbor, bring on that neighbor, you might get two more. And you just kind of sell that way. And yeah, it was time consuming, but it was the game we knew we were playing against.
And was it very much based on those kind of personal connections? So, the customer told their friend, or was it more formalized than that?
No, I think it was very much based on that. I think there was a vacuum in terms of the product that was there, the competing product in certain ways that we were helping to fill. But we moved from having kind of 2-3 programs within our mental health range to having 18 within about a year, a little over a year, which was an amazing work from the team to do that. So we had a complete suite. So essentially what that stopped was competitors coming in by offering point solutions. So we kind of we moved into a much more platform strategy than we perhaps were focused on originally. But yeah, no, it was the more informal. And at the end of the day, the NHS is focused on outcomes, on access levels, and on quality of care, and cost reduction as well. So I think that's universal of any health system around the world, whether you're in the Middle East, in the UK, or here in the US. And if you can help them to sort of get that value proposition, to enable them to champion what you have, you'll go far, I think.
It's a very different, I mean, I agree with you, but it's a very different model to the US in that, a lot of places, they don't really trust the private sector coming in, and there's a whole kind of, the NHS is public. And then also, I mean, mental health, 8 years ago wasn't trendy, it was very little money being spent. So, and now it's like, one of the hottest areas. So how did you find that, trying to find the money, because, how did you kind of sniff it out and figure out where the budgets were?
Yeah, I mean, a huge challenge and an amazing team that we have brought on is how we found it out collectively together. Persistence, all those kind of things. I remember one humorous story in hindsight, but kind of alarming story if you actually were back at the time, which was we were in with a very well-known law firm in Dublin, and in propositioning our wares in terms of mental health delivery and support and resilience and stress management and sleep and all these this sort of program ranges, we were beginning to push into the more the employer segment. And it was just met with stony face of, no one in here has depression. No one in here has anxiety. What are you in here for? Was literally the feedback that we got versus today. I mean, COVID, one positive impact, if there could be in any way a positive impact of something as big as COVID-19, has been that we've moved from saying I'm stressed to I have anxiety. And that's a huge step forward in that sort of stigma reduction, in that allowing people to have access to care. And that's very, very significant. In terms of hunting at the money, as I say, the following the dollars, as they kind of say here with the US systems, it was a challenge, and still is a challenge today. If you're not reimbursed, you're kind of forgotten about in terms of delivery. But there are innovation funds, there are access to those sort of pools in terms of delivery, and you just got to keep going after those as much as you possibly can do as you grow, and we move closer and closer to a reimbursement world. And the way you get reimbursement is by showing the effectiveness, the direct and indirect return on investment. In the US, the interesting backdrop that is different is, as Jim well knows, is the sheer cost of healthcare here is just staggering. As an Irish person or somebody from the UK, it's just a complete different mind shift. And me moving over here, I think, was an essential part of me learning that, and essential for the company, and getting the bills through the door for kid, son, 4-year-old son swallowing a coin, and going, we're paying for what and the how, and it was just, did we buy the CT machine? kind of costs that are there, which is just phenomenal. And people don't realize that, okay, this is certainly slightly more tabloidy, but the cost for an ambulance coming out to bring into hospital could cost up to $5,000.
Yeah.
And you just then extrapolate that across every part of the US healthcare system. And that's what is there today. So the impact you're having in Ireland or in the UK about cost saving, it's multiple times because the amount of dollars that are spent here in the US.
The strategy, Ken, was to not start in Ireland, go to the UK, crack the UK market, and then you moved to US and you're living in the US. Jim, if I got your strategy right, you kind of focused on Ireland first and saw it as a great test market to kind of figure out a lot of dynamics. And then you've moved to a lot of different international markets, but now a big focus on the US. Maybe tell us a little bit about kind of...
Before Jim does, because I'm going to be corrected on this, strategy is what's happened in the past. Right. So that was... We're all very, strategy,
hindsight.
Yeah, strategy is phenomenal when you look back on it in terms of time. We were shooting everywhere. We were trying everything.
I just want to know if you got the coin back.
We did actually. Yeah, we did.
Okay, good. I'm glad I thought of it this way. I kind of, having done companies before, I knew it was going to be hard, right? Like I kind of got that part. I learned that part the first time around, and and I knew. So I thought about it was that these multinationals, these pharmaceutical companies, I didn't know that I would keep selling into the pharma companies for as long as I have, but I kind of said, I want to design my product so that it can survive the multinational pharmaceutical company processes. So what did they need? Well, they had particular, ways of doing planning, like annual plans. They have particular medical legal reviews that you need to satisfy. They have certain types of validation processes. They have how they pilot and then think about it for scale. So I kind of thought I could use my pharmaceutical kind of industry know-how, specifically in the Irish marketplace, to kind of get exemplars, to get implementations, of these different multinationals that could act as the evidence, thing to get us into the next country, and then eventually get the attention of the global teams that will allow us, to sign, master vendor agreements and kind of move from country to country. And it's kind of, and I kind of almost did it like with my first big client. We kind of did it almost with them. We were quite transparent about it. They got quite excited about our hardware and our system, for, tracking adherence and injectable medication. So they were almost, and then we also, they would get incentivized almost for introducing innovation throughout the organization. It was seen as a good thing, as a way to get yourself promoted, to move through the organization. So I just tried to kind of really zero in on all their natural system incentives. They were, the way they bought, would be different than an insurance system. How they thought about return on investment. Sometimes they couldn't even talk about return on investment because of, regulations. So you had to just go so inside baseball, as a term you're getting used to, probably Ken, in Boston now. You just had to go so inside their heads and really almost understand their business better than they understood it, and understood how they would implement the technology. So I saw that as a way of kind of incubating in Ireland and then getting into these different countries. And then we took a view that, now what we found was where that strategy got questioned was any of these, they call them large business units, but any of the big markets, US, UK, Germany, possibly Canada, but definitely like France, is that there's all kinds of market access issues in those markets that they'll almost by design not easily adopt technologies from other markets into those markets. It almost seems to be, these kind of natural blockers to those markets where there's some gatekeeper or some additional system in place that says, hey, unless you're a French company or unless you're a UK company and have this this certification or this system. So we found that strategy to be excellent to get us from like Ireland to Portugal to Netherlands to Belgium to Israel to South Africa to Latvia to, we went everywhere. So we largely implemented those projects from the Irish market. But then as soon as we got to the bigger markets, we had to have like feet on the ground. And like what you were talking about, Ken, you had to someone living and breathing the challenges of that market and almost like talk to them in their local vernacular. And if you couldn't do that, you couldn't survive their processes. And those units would be so big inside these organizations that they almost had carte blanche. They didn't have to do what global told them to do. They could just kind of do what they wanted to do. So that was my take on it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I mentioned to both of you that, like, I thought I knew the US market. I've been traveling back and forth for about 15 years. And it was only when I lived there for a very short period of time in Boston that, I realized just how complicated, when you're having to fill out the insurance forms and try to figure out where to bring your kid, which ER system, like, just how different and how complicated it is. Like, Ireland or UK, like, they're, you can figure it out, but the US is so big and so fragmented, right? And then thinking about how you take, so how that's good and bad, right? It's scary, but also exciting. So how do you then think, Jim, about that transition from the Latvias and Israels and Germany, this world, into like your home country, and kind of how your strategy has to evolve there?
Yeah, I mean, like, you could probably talk about it. When I say I'm American Irish instead of Irish American, I've gone the other way, but I think that the market, there's this weird kind of contiguous nature of the market, right? That it's all one market in the US in one way, and in another way, it's all these like disparate systems that that kind of are reflective of each other, but they don't, it doesn't pass along. So you're in this constant state of it is one market and it's not one market, and and then so you then have to start, like anything, you have to start sub-segmenting the market into like how you attack it, and what's these natural, like if you go into specialty pharmacy for us, then they distribute across all the U.S. states, right? So now you're accessing it, but you're only accessing for the customers that they're being asked to service. So that becomes a way into it. If you do the insurance segment, then you end up in their regional kind of profile.
Yeah.
If you go to Medicare, so it's like a lot of things. It's where I think if you go to Canada, they have, or you go to some of these other markets where they do implement regionally. The U.S. doesn't quite implement regionally, right? It's like it's this kind of, I don't know, Ken, would you agree here?
Yeah, absolutely, I do agree. I think the challenge is sort of, and for all companies who go through this phase, I think probably healthcare is probably worse than most other industries, is this kind of pilot itis, where
Do you find that is that in the US as well? Is it
I think it's more in the US in a lot of ways. Personally, it's kind of some of the challenges that we've had to push through is that they just purchased a electronic health record system for $46 million, yet won't spend X on a solution that's a fraction of the cost. It's just very strange. I think it's where budget sits and decision making sits and all those challenges are. Yeah, I mean, for us, at the same time, we brought on Optum Health, one of the biggest insurers in the US. We brought them on in July 2012. So we brought them quite early in our journey, even before we'd really entered the UK market, which was quite strange. And we kind of continued, or I continued to kind of sell by vacation. So flying back and forth, to the point it got to a level where I was essentially spending 75% of my time, 80% of my time away. We just had our first son, Harry. So that was challenging, to put it mildly. So we myself and my wife had a conversation, which was basically, you're traveling 80% of the time to the US. Why don't we live in the US? And then travel 20% back, typical,
and now with COVID,
typical clarity of thought. So we did that.
Married well. You've married well, Ken.
now with COVID, we're all locked up in our rooms, and so let's kind of, I know we're kind of getting into the last part of the time, but now that we're all trying to sell remotely and work remotely, tell us, Jim, how's that playing with you, and then Ken, will get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning of it, we talked about this before, Martin, like, is that it was better, I think, almost. So meaning, because of all the, Ken, you talked about mental health, but that's really the virtualization of healthcare was now happening.
Yeah.
It's real. There was a panic. There was a need to kind of embrace solutions. People didn't really, it was almost energy and it was almost like all the negativity in the world, and there was this kind of positivity. And I think like healthcare, was stepping up, right? So there was this enthusiasm and energy in it. And then we got the benefit of like Ken was talking about, not having to be on a plane, right? So we got this efficiency benefit, and we got this enthusiasm to embrace it. And so that for us, that led to a lot of deals, and, we signed a lot more deals and a lot faster, and there was an efficiency to that. I think now, I wonder, and I'm not convinced that it's there, but is that enthusiasm, like now it's here to stay, like what sticks about that business development process? And when do you need that actual, just people getting in a room, solving problems, getting to know each other a little bit better, getting to like each other, getting to understand that only comes with, a more, kind of intimate interaction with people. And I think that, it's like the breaking bread idea, having a meal with someone, changes your relationship. And do we become, more transactional? And, we find, like I find is that the older people, which I'll put myself in one of those columns, unfortunately, are really missing that human contact. And then some of the younger people in my team actually are either kind of grown up this way, and they don't necessarily seek it as much as we do. So my question is, are we overvaluing that, human to human contact, or are they undervaluing it? It's probably somewhere in the middle. So I think we're taxing it now, Martin, is my take on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Ken, what do you think?
Yeah, I think certainly at the start there was a novelty factor to it.
That's good.
But yeah, listen, I'm lucky in terms of the little unit. I think moving to a different country, Jim, as you'll know, and Martin, as you'll know as well, will test a relationship, a marriage, and it'll either work or it won't. And it's worked for us. So we've kind of locked into a little fort, as we kind of have seen ourselves, a little unit. So I suppose in the starting period of time, it essentially kind of gave us more time together. That was kind of had been missing for the last couple of years. So there was a huge benefit to that. My concern is with the wider SilverCloud team, the challenges they go into, be you single, be you married, be you have an elderly parent or parents or relations or whatever else it is. People's minds are being pulled, they're being strained, they're being stressed so heavily right now. The second wave, and it's almost in some ways there's a third and a fourth wave going to come as well in different ways, shapes and forms. It's hard for people to process. It really is a struggle. And, you need to have some good coping mechanisms to be able to handle it. And for people who are working, we've a ridiculously passionate, caring, they take empathy into the next stage, which is that kind of compassion stage. So they work every hour under the sun, and that's wonderful, but it's not, because they shouldn't be. And they have personal, and they need time down, and need to sharpen the axe, and all the other cliches that will come in. And those cliches are there for a reason, because we need time off. People starting early in the morning, finishing late, or kind of almost not finishing. It's laptop, close, bed, open up, laptop on lap, or laptop on kitchen table, or laptop in home office. And I think, it's challenging an awful lot of the norms of what we have in terms of, our office. What will an office look like in a year's time? I think it's going to be a hotel lobby kind of type deal, that you kind of come in and you check in for half a day or a day, and there's loads of those kind of rooms rather than what was there before. So yeah, I think we were challenged with so in March, the team, we reached out to every healthcare organization that we were contracted with or were discussing contracting with. So and basically said, can we offer help? No ifs, no buts, no catches, no exclamation marks, no messing. And they all kind of came back to the university and said, can you help us with our own staff, our own team members, our own workforce? So the product and dev team built out a COVID suite with a COVID program called Living in Challenging Times. I think they built it in 18 days and got tested with some amazing experts around the world. We went along and essentially pushed it out and made it enabled it for all the HSE workforce. It's now been pushed out to GPs across Ireland as we speak, NHS workforce, and then just some of the biggest healthcare organizations here in the US. And they're all extremely grateful for it. And I think even more grateful as time went on and realized there kind of wasn't a catch. It was just, we had raised money earlier this year. We felt we had to do it. And we kind of went kind of quiet enough about it and just did it. The challenge with that, though, a lot of people sacrificed a lot internally within SilverCloud, their personal time, their own personal relationships. And it does cause burnout. It really does. And that's a big thing that we have to be so careful of as we go towards whatever your holiday is, be it Christmas or other. It's that kind of burnout feeling.
What strikes me, Ken, like listening to you talk about that program is, I was saying with Ken and Martin, the same way is like, kind of giving into the system. Like every time I've met Ken, like in an airport or, talking about like doing an investment round or whatever it is, you're kind of giving into the, and it doesn't seem like it's an effort. Like you're like, hey, Jim, here's how I tackle that problem. What's going on? Can we help you? And you say the same thing to my co-founder, Kieran. So the idea of just kind of giving into it and not knowing what you're going to get back, if anything, that you just have an opportunity to help. And you wonder about our ability, like, now that we have to do this all remotely, how does that change, right? Like now you have to do it through software. Like you can help them, but you got to help them through software instead of meeting them up and, meeting with them and giving some enthusiasm or,
yeah, I mean, for me, I think definitely miss the conferences where you could do the back-to-backs, and you'd be exhausted, and you go have a beer and you decompress, and then you meet somebody you met earlier on, you have a beer with them, and it's just there was so much of that which was amazing, that I'll sorely miss. And you learned and you heard and you got the gossip and you got the inside scoop on this, and that was important. That was important.
Well, guys, we're almost out of time. What I've taken away from this is that it's all about resilience. Just keep them going, just keep them going, no matter how hard it takes, just keep them going. So we always ask our guests one question, which is if you weren't running digital health companies, founding digital health companies in another universe, another time, you had another way of living your life, what would it be? If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Oh, I'd be in a shed building shit. I'd be like,
or just shit.
Oh yeah, I mean like products and things, and like I'm not quite an artist, and I wouldn't be that good at it, but I just love tinkering. I don't know if that's something more recently, but I love coming up with ideas and assembling physical products. I don't know what that means.
Good answer.
Yeah, for me, I think there's probably a similarity with what Jim mentioned. I think I'd be the modern Howard Hughes, or love to aspire to be the modern Howard Hughes. That level of eccentricity, inventiveness, but also a pilot as well. So I think I'd love all of those things together. Would be something that's, another world.
Brilliant. Well, guys, thanks. It's been awesome. Appreciate your time.
Not at all. Thank you, Martin. Thanks, Jim.
Martin.
Okay.